Now we cross over to our Oh Soo-young for global insight and an in-depth look at important developments in world affairs.
Thank you, Mark. It's time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. Securing and expanding South Korea's trade ties will be one of the incoming Yoon Suk-yeol government's biggest tasks when it takes office on May 10th. And with the COVID-19 pandemic and geopolitical uncertainties throwing the global economy and trade into disarray, Seoul will seek stronger and more resilient partnerships. Today, we discuss its prospects with Jun-sok, Professor of Economics at the Catholic University of Korea. We also have Hyon-do, Professor of the Sogang Euro-MENA Institute at the Sogang University in Seoul. A very warm welcome to you both. And, well, beginning with you, Professor Yang, first of all, it's lovely to see you. And, well, my first question to you is, South Korea's Conservative President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol, he has pledged to strengthen the Seoul-Washington alliance and also diversify South Korea's trade with the intent of reducing its dependence on the Chinese market. But given its huge reliance on its China-bound shipments, is this deliberate turn away from the Chinese market possible?
Okay, happy to see you as well. And I think it's it'll be pretty difficult to reduce the trade volume that's going to China because, well, if you look at the two biggest determinants of what affects trade volume, it's economic size and distance. Obviously, China is very close to Korea, and right now, China is the second largest economy in the world at 17% of the global GDP. If you calculate that using purchasing power, then China is already the largest economy in the world. And additionally, China is right now manufacturing center for the world as well. So we export a lot of intermediate parts to China, but it's indirectly being exported to consuming countries like United States, European Union. So unless other countries become a lot bigger, I do not see the Korea's trade dependence on China shrinking anytime soon. We might be able to affect it on the margins. There might be some surprises, like, for example, Vietnam, which has, even though it's not a very large economy in terms of global scale, it has emerged as a very large destination for Korean exports because it's becoming a global manufacturing center as well. But still, as long as China remains a very large economy, I do not see trade going to China falling anytime soon.
Well, Professor Yang, there has long been talk of South Korea diversifying its trade ties, but even if it does so, would it be possible to overcome the losses and the possible economic retaliation from Beijing that may occur should South Korea side, should it inch closer to the US?
Well, if Korea does it quietly, and what I mean by doing it quietly is it looks like a natural result of market transactions, then I think there won't be that much of a problem because, well, every exporter tries to expand their markets. But if it involves political and diplomatic elements, joining a politically oriented bloc, for example, and have diplomatic and technological consequences, then China may decide to get involved more actively. But just the fact of Korea trying to diversify its export destinations, I don't think just by that China will object all that much.
Well, South Korea nevertheless is trying to increase its trade ties, of course, as you said. Every country wants to do so. And Professor Park, now bringing you into the conversation. First of all, thank you for joining us again. Now, South Korea's free trade talks with the 6 Gulf countries, they've been stalled for over 12 years, but they've been resumed this week, actually, on Monday. But first of all, what was the reason for the very long stall in talks, and what does Seoul's trade relations with these countries look like right now?
Good morning. Actually, both sides, Korea and GCC countries, agreed to start the negotiation in 2007 and they had talks until 2009 three times. But in 2010, the GCC they stopped the negotiation because they need to reconsider the policy and need time to study free trade agreement with Korea. And then we have a long silence for the last almost 13 years, and we start the negotiation. Again in last January when Korea actually the minister went to visit Saudi Arabia, and they agreed to reopen the negotiation. As a matter of fact, the main reason why the GCC and Korea restart the negotiation is very simple. Korea has a very different tactics actually to open the negotiation again with the GCC countries. It was very difficult actually for Korea to go with the free trade agreement with the GCC countries, as GCC countries are composed of 6 countries, and every 6 country has different policy and their own policy aims. So it was very difficult to get the unanimous decisions from the organization. So Korea actually prioritized on approaching the UAE, and Korea set up the comprehensive economic partnership agreement with United Arab Emirates, and it motivated, in a sense, it stimulated the GCC organization to reconsider starting again the free trade agreement with Korea.
Professor Park, now that they've started the talks again, what do you think will be the outcome for Seoul and the GCC after their 4-day talks this week? What do you think the officials would have really prioritized and focused on?
Well, actually, this is for the first time. Actually, we have a free trade agreement talk with the GCC in 13 years. So we cannot expect too much from this meeting, but both sides try to narrow down the differences, and also both sides try to minimize loss and maximize profit on their own trade strength. So probably there will be a lot of actually general discussions on every sector that they can possibly cover, for example, automobile and the metal equipment, and also the oil and gas export. So they probably will have a very positive outcome from the agreement, I believe.
I see. And Professor Yang, in terms of looking for future opportunities for South Korea, what potential lies ahead for Seoul if it joins the US-led range of initiatives like the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework?
Okay, one thing that we discovered during the coronavirus epidemic is that supply chains will have to be guaranteed, and that has increased interest in what's called a secure supply chain. That involves making sure that the supply chain is not cut off, so steady supply, steady, especially in intermediate parts like semiconductors, but also some measures to try to limit technology going into wrong destinations. So there are more interest not only in supply chain security, but also technology security. And if we join the US-led efforts on that, I think we will be acknowledged as a safe supply chain partner, and that will be good for Korean exporters. But we'll probably have to obey some provisions on technology security as well, that make sure that technology, especially latest technologies, do not go into countries that United States and Western countries believe can work against global interests. And that might cause some problems on the parts of countries like China and Russia. But I think in terms of the Korea's exporters' interests, Korea should seriously consider joining the IPEC.
And Professor Park, in what areas does South Korea and the GCC share common economic interests and potential for growth?
Well, the free trade agreement has a very positive effect on the total bilateral exports for both Korea and the GCC countries. For example, it motivates the production of Korea's main exporting sectors to the GCC countries like automobile, transportation equipment, and construction products and metal products. And at the same time, it also motivates the GCC countries' main exporting sectors to Korea, like oil, gas, and petroleum products, because Korea actually imports a lot, or more than 60% of the oil and gas products from the GCC countries. So both sides will will be benefit from the free trade agreement, and the free trade agreement will be a very positive effect on both sides. And at the same time, probably it would be much better if we go beyond actually the free trade agreement, like we have a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with the United Arab Emirates. And if we actually both sides pursue to have a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with each other, that will be much better and a very strong positive effects on both sides.
Oh, so you see them deepening their cooperation beyond trade ties then, Professor Park?
Mm-hmm. Yes, actually, right now the Middle East is changing. And as the world watches, the Middle East is entirely changing. United States recalibrate its policies on the Middle East, and the United States deprioritize America's focus on the Middle East. So this is in a sense, the opportunities widely opens, but at the same time, we have also the problems with the Middle East. And Middle East countries right now, they try to find the stable economic partners, and especially Korea is a very important partner for the Middle East, as Korea has two great things, like Korea developed economy and at the same time democracy. And Korea will become a great model for the GCC countries. And GCC countries actually try to learn a lot from the Korea. And we like to expand our economic ties with the Middle Eastern countries before any other competing country like China will get a strong foothold in the region.
Well, it's taking more than 13 years, but it looks like there are very exciting prospects to look forward to that. And well, Professor Yang, what do you hope to see from the Yoon administration? What do you hope to see the new president-elect really prioritize over the next 5 years to boost and secure South Korea's trade relations and business interests around the world?
Well, one problem is that President-elect is not an economics person. He's not an international relations person. He's a law person. So I hope he can get up to speed very quickly. I hope he has some very good advisors. I know that he does have very good advisors among his pool, so I hope he takes their advice. And then I hope that perhaps because he is from a conservative party, he is of a conservative bent, and he follows the political advice from the Conservative Party. Perhaps he'll be very close to the United States and try to separate himself perhaps too much from China. But as I mentioned before, that is probably not possible in the short term. So we hope that he will take the case in terms of pragmatism rather than idealism. And this does not mean that we should refrain from joining U.S.-led initiatives like IPEC, but I think we really need to have balance between the major global powers so that we don't really cut ourselves off from any potential Korean markets, and it should be in the interest of Korean exporters and try not to get too much idealism so that the businesses can pragmatically export to many different regions rather than concentrating on one block or the other.
And before we go, Professor Yang, another question to you. So South Korea's trade minister said this week that South Korea will deepen its trade relations based on the bilateral FTA it has with the US. In what ways could they do this?
Well, Right now, the bilateral chorus FTA has done a lot to increase trade between the United States and Korea. If you remember, before the chorus FTA passed 10 years ago, some of the American products like American beef, people really distrusted some of the imports from the United States. That is no longer the case. Koreans are buying not only a lot of US beef, but they're also buying stuff directly from the United States using the internet. And Americans, they've been open to a lot of things from Korean culture, K-pop, movies, and so on. So that is, I think, a substantial reason for that is Chorus FTA reduced barriers for cultural goods from Korea, and agricultural goods and other goods from the United States. It reduced the barriers for online ordering. So I think it did a lot to help Korean consumers. That trend should continue, but it also requires that Korean firms become more competitive and more innovative. Korean firms, I think, do have a tendency to leave the things as they are. They do not like things to change. I think that's true for all businesses. But in order to adapt to new situations, they do have to change. And Chorus FTA, I think, gave a lot of impetus for companies to change in Korea. And so that innovative bent, innovative pressure, I think, should continue. And that means more market opening measures that go beyond the Chorus FTA, some of the areas that has not been touched or has been sort of sacred because of political consequences. I think those areas, liberalizing those areas in terms of, say, data security, that should be explored. It should be in Korea's interest. We should not open everything, but still, we should seriously consider opening to increase competitiveness, which will give Korean firms a more innovative push toward innovation.
I see, and certainly, as you said, as globalized as South Korea's consumers and businesses are, the Yoon government will have its work cut out trying to take it to the next level, especially amid all these global uncertainties. But well, this is where we'll end our interview today. That was Jun-sok, Professor of Economics at the Catholic University of Korea, and Hyon-do, Professor at the Sogang Euro-MENA Institute at Sogang University. Thank you both so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.